Kakadosh Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. We're going to continue with Daf Zayin Amud Aleph 781. This is Masechet Eruvin. Okay? So it says over here as follows. It says, Rabbi Yoshua, this is talking about Rabbi Yoshua de lo mashkech b'bat kol. If you remember, we were talking about that according to Shtat Rabbi Yoshua, he never paid attention to the bat kol, and therefore, even though the bat kol came and said that we paskin like Bet Hillel all the time, we don't always go like Bet Hillel in this scenario. Okay? If you want, you could also answer, right? Hachi kamar. This is what it really means to say. Yeah, what does this mean? Kol heicha, it says, Kol heicha, the mashkacha tre tanai utre amorai de pliga dadi. Whenever you're going to find two tanaim or two amoraim that are arguing on each other, just like the machloket of Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, lo liaved ki kule demor v'chi kule demor. We don't go like the kulot of each one, like the leniencies of each one. Velo ke chumre demor v'chumre, not like the stringencies of each one. Ela, but rather, o ki kule demor chumre avid, o ki kule demor chumre avid, or you have to do like the kula and the chumre of the same one. Meaning, I cannot choose today the leniency of Bet Hillel and the leniency of Bet Shammai, or the stringency of Bet Hillel and stringency of Bet Shammai. But what am I allowed to do? I'm allowed to do the leniency and stringency of Bet Shammai, or the leniency and stringency of Bet Hillel. That's what we're saying. Why? Because it's the same person. Because you have to always keep the same idea. You cannot just come and start switching right back and forth. Okay?
It's the same for the Rav. You cannot ask.
Exactly, 100%. You're 100% correct. Which means that the concept is that it's not good that you're playing around, you're switching around. It has to be the same the entire time. Not, my Rav on this says it's permitted, so I go like my Rav. But all of a sudden, my Rav said that scooters you can't use, all of a sudden I have another Rav. No. Yes. Always the same Rav. Okay?
Yes.
Fine. So says the Gemara, Mikomakom Kashya, at the end of the day, it's still going to be a question from the Braita. Why? The Braita says that we cannot be machmid like two chumrot of two people that are arguing. Okay? And here, we were exactly doing it. We were going like the chumrah of Rav and the chumrah of Shmuel. Right? If you remember, we were going like the chumrah of Rav and Shmuel, that first of all, they considered a mavui mefulash. Right? And then, that's what it says, like Rav that says it's sorotam mefulash. Right? And then like Shmuel, that he says like Hananya, that you need a door. So it's like two stringencies. So Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, no, kule krav avdua. They did everything like Rav. Why? The Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, says Rav Huna like in the name of Rav. Halacha, the halacha is like the Tanakama, then Murinkin, but we don't pass like that. Halacha Maseh for everyone. Which means sometimes we have a concept that that's the halacha, but we don't pass like that in front of everyone. So therefore, even though the halacha was like the Tanakama, still we're always going to require a door, not like the Tanakama. Because that's what, if people ask, that's what they're going to answer them. So ask the Gemara, but according to Ravada Barava, he says, no, that in Shitat Rav, it is the halacha like Tanakama, and we do paskin like that. What, Michael, man, what are you going to say like that? So Amar Rav Shizbi says, Ki lo avdinan kechumre devetrei, hecha de satri adade. When do we say that you cannot do the stringencies of both when they argue on each other, which means it's a contradiction. If I would go like one stringency and another stringency and they go against each other, I don't do it. Kegon, for example, shidra v'gilgolet, the spinal cord and the skull. It's not we learned in the Mishnah in Oholot. Hashidra v'gilgolet shechasu. If something's lacking from the spinal cord or from the gulgolet, right? What do we say? There's no tumat ohel. It does not contaminate in the tent. The kama chesron b'shidra. How much is the chesron in the shidra? Bet Shammai says shte chuliot, two vertebrates, they say in English? Two chuliot. How do you say chuliot? Like the round?
Vertebrates.
Vertebrates, very good. Bet Hillel says even one, chulya achat. Ugulgolet in the skull, how much does that have to be lacking? Bet Shammai says kimlo magdeach. The Gemara is going to explain what is kimlo magdeach. What does it mean? It's like a magdeach is like usually like a drill or like a hammer type of a thing. But he says that the Gemara is going to explain later on what does this mean. Okay? Bet Hillel says it's enough to take away from a living person and they will die. Means there has to be enough that you would take away from a living person and he would die because of it. Amar Rav Yehuda says Shmuel, the same exact machloket is the machloket with the terefa. right? Well, that's a machloka between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, which means that not only is it to do with tumat met, also to do with an animal, is it considered a trefa or not, is this machloket. Aval heicha de lo satri adadi avdinan, but if they do not argue in each other, you do it. Which means that it comes out that there's a very important yesod. The important yesod is that if it's going to be satre ahadade, if it's going to contradict each other, we do say, right, avdinan, we do the stringencies if they do not contradict each other. But if they do contradict each other, that's when you don't do both of them together, okay? So what we just said the yesod is that any time that they contradict each other, for example, by tumat met and by the terefa, which if I would go like the stringency of each one, the stringency of Bet Shammai by 2, and the stringency of Bet Hillel by 1, so by tumat met, it's like a leniency, but by terefa, it would be even a more leniency, it would be the contradicting each other. So therefore, but then I cannot do it. But if they're not contradicting each other, I'm allowed to do it. So says the Gemara, if they contradict each other, I'm not allowed to do it together? I'm not allowed to put two parts together even though they both contradict each other? Mati, Rav Mesharshi is going to ask a question against this from a writer. Maaseh Rabbi Akiva, there was a story with Rabbi Akiva. Sheliket etrog be'echad b'shvat. That basically what happened is he started collecting the fruits of the etrog, right? So the etrog fruit on the 1st of Shvat, on the 3rd year to Shnot HaShmita. Now, usually on the 3rd year, you have to collect Maaser Ani. Remember, Maaser Sheni is years 1, 2, 4, 5. So that's Maaser Sheni. Maaser Sheni means that when you have your field, the first thing that you take off is Truma Gdola. Truma Gdola is a very small portion, right? That's 1/24, 1/50, whatever. You take it to the Kohen. After that, you take Maaser Rishon. Maaser Rishon is 10%, which goes to the Levi. Okay? 10% goes to the Levi. The Levi comes and he's going to take off 10% from himself, and give it to the Kohen. That's called Trumat Maaser. Afterwards, there's another additional 10%. On years 1, 2, 4, 5, it's called Maaser Sheni. Maaser Sheni, you take off another 10%, and you could either save that produce, take it to Yerushalayim, and eat it within the walls of Jerusalem, and that you're allowed to do, or you could redeem it, add a 5th, take the money, and then you go to Jerusalem and you spend it. When you go every time to Jerusalem for the Shalosh Regalim, you spend it on food in Jerusalem. That's called Maaser Sheni. Years 3 and 6 is Maaser Ani. It goes to the Aniim, okay? And then 7 is Shemitah. So that's how you do the different years. Now remember, the Ani anyway will always get his portion as well. Because Leket, Shikha, Peah, the corner of the field, or when you have the bundles that they fall and you forget, or things like that, anyway goes to the Aniim. But this is not talking about that. We're talking about a 10%, which is Maaser Ani going to the Aniim. So he says what happened is that he started collecting on the 1st of Shvat, on the 3rd year, which goes to the Maaser Ani. He went and he took the fruits, the etrogim. He did 2 Maasers. Maaser Sheni and Maaser Ani because of the Safek. Echad, one of them like Bet Shammai. Because according to Shita Bet Shammai, they say that not Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah La'ilanot, the 15th of Shvat, what we actually do like Bet Hillel. He was going like Bet Shammai. The Bet Shammai says on the 1st of Shvat is already considered Rosh Hashanah for the Ilanot, and therefore you have to take off Maaser Ani. Ve'echad and Maaser Sheni, like Bet Hillel, that they were saying Rosh Hashanah Ilanot is the 15th. So it comes out that he was actually doing like the Chumrot of 2 different people. The Chumrah of Bet Shammai and the Chumrah of Bet Hillel. He took off the etrogim on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Now, according to Bet Shammai, it's already the next year. It's the 3rd year, so Maaser Ani. According to Bet Hillel, it's only the 15th of Shvat that it's the next year. So what did he do? He took off 2 Maasers. One Maaser like Bet Shammai, which is Maaser Ani. Another Maaser like Bet Hillel, Maaser Sheni. Now, what happened? This Chumrah, they actually argue on each other. They contradict each other. Right? Why? Because you cannot take off both in the same year. It contradicts each other. It's impossible. It's not just stam that I want to come and I want to do something extra. One contradicts the other. So how could you just tell me a yesod, a fundamental concept, that when they contradict each other, you do not do it? Here they contradict each other and you still do it. And that's what Rabbi Akiva actually did. Okay? So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Akiva Gemarei Stapekle. Says Rabbi Akiva Be'emet, he had a doubt in the Gemara in itself. What does mean in his learning? Why? He did not want to stam come and be machmi like Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, but rather he did everything like Bet Hillel. V'lo yadai Bet Hillel be'echad b'shvat amur u'b'chamisa b'shvat amur. He didn't remember what does Bet Hillel actually hold, the 15th or the 1st? Meaning we know that it's the 15th, but for Rabbi Akiva, he wasn't sure. So since he wasn't sure, he says, listen, we're not going like Bet Shammai. We don't do like Bet Shammai. We do like Bet Hillel. But I have a problem. I don't remember what was the Shita of Bet Hillel. Does Bet Hillel do the 15th or the 1st? So because I'm not sure in Bet Hillel, I'm only doing Bet Hillel. But I have to do both, Ma says, because of Bet Hillel. Okay? So therefore he did it like both stringencies. But it wasn't because he was doing the stringency of Bet Shammai and the stringency of Bet Hillel. Because that you don't do. He was only doing like Bet Hillel. But I have a doubt on Bet Hillel, so I was doing the stringencies in Bet Hillel itself. Okay? So now we put that on a pause. We go back. Okay? So put this on the side burner. That was just something very interesting that we learned about chumrot, kulot, stringencies, leniencies, when we apply them in life. That means basically a person has to understand that even when he does a stringency, it's not a free-for-all, right? Or a leniency, it's not a free-for-all. It has to be done with wisdom, with halakha, with knowing what we're doing, okay, with understanding. Next, the Gemara is going to go back to the machloka between Tanakama and Hananya to do with what we said, to do with when we have a mavui, which is mifulash. Remember, mavui mifulash means that it's going straight through two different Reshut Rabim. Meaning here you have a Reshut Rabim, on the bottom you have a Reshut Rabim, and you have a mavui, which is cutting through, right? It's like a side street. For example, 95th Street, 96th Street. That's called the mavui, which is going through Harding and Collins. That's two Reshut Rabims, right? The Reshut Rabim of Collins, the Reshut Rabim of Harding, and then let's say the 95th Street or 96th Street going straight through. Okay? So says the Gemara, Yati v'Kama, and they were sitting and saying, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Says Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. Machloket, the machloket of the Tanaim, whether it is that according to Tanakama, it's enough just to have Tzurat HaPetach, which is the entrance way. Remember, Tzurat HaPetach is usually, nowadays, we say Tzurat HaPetach is a korah, which is the top beam, and the lechi, which is a side post, right? So he says over here, it's already enough Tzurat HaPetach in order to do it, to fix it, but you don't need a door, okay? Besratya, this is only going to be when the Rechov Rashi is Mikan, Usrat Mikan, meaning that you have two principal roads, one on the top and one on the bottom. Uplatya Mikan, Uplatya Mikan. Right? Or when you have a big marketplace in one place and a big one in another place. However, though, what happens if you only have one major road on the bottom or on the top, ubika, and then you have fields, right, on the other side? Or bika on one side and bika on the other side. You have fields or valleys on both sides, but you don't have major roads going through both mavuis. Meaning, remember, the mavui is like a side street going into chatzerot, courtyards, and each courtyard has houses, okay? So that's a mavui. Then you have the main street. The main street is called the Sratya. Okay? So you have the main street. So he says, when was the machloke between Hananya and Tanakama? Only when you have two main streets. One on the top and one on the bottom. And the mavui going in the middle. What happens if you only have a one side? Doesn't matter whether it's on the top or the bottom. And the other side is a valley or fields, or both sides are valleys or fields. What's the halacha? Says the Gemara, it comes out that in such a case, it's only midrabanan, it's only rabbinical, and therefore set Tzurat HaPetach mikan v'lechi v'korah mikan. You only have to do Tzurat HaPetach on one side, and the other side you do a lechi v'korah. You do a side post and a beam on the top, and that's all that you need. So says the Gemara, hashta l'sratya mikanu bika mikanu selu Tzurat HaPetach mikanu lechi v'korah mikan bika mikan mibae. 1 second. I don't understand. If you already told me that you had a major road on the top, okay? Remember, everyone look at me. You've got major road on the top, and then you have a mavui. Okay, this is a side street. Major road on the top, side street. On the other side, you had a fields, or you had a valley, or you had anything else, but you didn't have a major road. If you already told me in such a case that it was already enough to do Tzurat HaPetach and lechi mikan v'korah mikan, which means an entrance post, right, like an entrance way, and on the other side, you just need the side post and the korah and the top beam. So then what is the Gemara telling me? That if you have both sides, because, which means both sides you have valleys, all the more so. For sure. If you already told me that if you have one major road going through it, right, on the top, connected to it, and the other side is a valley, that you don't need a door, Kal v'chomer, then in the case where both are valleys or both are fields on both sides, so answers the Gemara, hachi kamar. This is what it means to say. Lesratia mikan ubika mikan naaseh kemibika mikan mibika mikan. No, we're explaining it. If you have a major road on the top or the bottom, and then on the other side you only have a valley or fields, that becomes like the both sides are valleys or fields. That's what it's saying. That it's not teaching you also the halakha is like that. It makes it that the halakha is like that. And therefore, you don't need, according to everybody, a door. All you need is surat petach, right? And on the other side, you need a lechi mikan v'kora mikan. Okay, u'mesayem ba'mishmed Rav Yehuda, right? And, right, we're finishing, right, this in the name of Rav Yehuda. Imayam mavui kalel rechava. If right now the mavui, the entrance was the Reshut Rabim on one side, and the other side was open up, right? Was also open up to the Reshut Rabim. So it comes out that it's only mefulash to the Reshut Rabim because of a breach. I'll show you the picture. This is the picture. Okay, you have it also in the art school. The top and the bottom, where it says Reshut Rabim in Hebrew, that is the public domain. Now you have the mavui, which is this part right here. This is the mavui going up and down. That's the mavui. Now what happens is remember, you have a courtyard here, and now here, this is supposed to be the backyard. But it was breached. Since it was breached, it also now opens up to a Reshut Rabim. It now also opens up to a public domain. So says the Gemara, if it was closed at the end, and then what happened was it was breached to another Reshut Rabim, and tzarich klum. That side does not need anything. Why? It's not considered a mavui mefulash, but rather it's like a mavui satum. It's like a closed mavui. It's not considered an open mavui. And therefore, all you need is a lechio korah, right? Which is basically, again, the side post or the top beam on the side opening to the Reshut Rabim, to the real Reshut Rabim. Right? Because the back part was a breach. It wasn't supposed to be that way. It was your backyard that just broke the fence and now it's open to a public domain. But it's not supposed to be that way. So Amar le Abaye Rav Yosef, says Abaye to Rav Yosef, Had Rav Yehuda, this was we say from Rav Yehuda, right? It says the Shmuelhi. That means Rav Yehuda did not, we said in the name of Rav Yehuda, but we didn't say the name of anybody else. Meaning, where did Rav Yehuda learn this from? So he says this actually comes from his rabbi, because we always usually say Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel or Rav Yehuda Mar Rav. But he says this is actually the name of Rav Yehuda the Shmuel. I'm Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. Because remember, Rav Yehuda was a student of both Rav and Shmuel. That's why many times in the Gemara, you will find Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav or Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, because he was a student of both. So here the Gemara is explaining, even though we brought it in the name of Rav Yehuda, but we didn't say the name of who, he actually brought this from his rabbi, from Shmuel. It's the Shmuelhi. Says on Zayin Amud Bet, De'i de Rav, but if you're going to tell me now that this is going according to Rav, Kashya de Rav de Rav betarte. So then it would be a contradiction, Rav and Rav, on two different halachot. The Amar of Yirmiyah Barab Amar Rav. It says of Yirmiyah Barab in the name of Rav. Mavui shenifratz bimlo'ol lechatzer. If you have a mavui that was completely open to the chatzer, okay, v'nifretza chatzer negdo, and then the chatzer also was nifretza in front of it, chatzer muteret, mavui asur. The mavui does become prohibited. Which means that according to Rav, in this case, again, I'll show you the picture, it's the same thing. Reshut Rabim on the bottom. Okay, here's the Reshut Rabim. And then here's the Mavui. This is the Mavui going up and down. Okay, here you have the two different courtyards. Okay, two different courtyards. Then you have the Chatzer, another courtyard. The wall in the back, and it was breached to the Reshut Rabim. Okay, it was breached. So says, according to Rav, in such a case where that happened, you're still permitted to carry within the Chatzer in itself. However, though, he says, right, but the fact that it still goes to the Reshut Rabim, the Mavui becomes prohibited now. So the courtyards are permitted, but the Mavui becomes prohibited. So says the Gemara, V'amai. But why? Why is it Asur? It should be Kamavui Shekala L'Chava. It's like the previous case that we just mentioned. It's the exact same thing. It's a Mavui that finished into the backyard, and now there was a breach in the backyard, but that's it. It should be permitted. So Amalei says Rav Yosef to Abaye, Ana lo yadana, right? I don't know this halakha of Rav Yehuda, right? But I only know one thing. Uvda hava bedura deravata. This story actually happened in the kfar, in a village of shepherds, right? Mavui shekalal rechavahava. It was the exact same case. It was a mavui. It was a side street that was finishing in the rechava, in a backyard. And what happened was, right? Ve'ata lekamed Rav Yehuda. They came in front of Rav Yehuda. Ve'lo atzechev lo mideh. He told him, you don't need anything. V'ikasha mishmed Rav. Now, if you're going to tell me that the halacha is like in the name of Rav, have a mishmed Shmuel ve'lo kasha mideh. If you would say that it's going according to Rav, so you have a question, because Rav just told you that you're not allowed to carry the mavui. If you say it in the name of Shmuel, it's perfect. So therefore, I prefer to say that Rav Yehuda said it in the name of Shmuel, and I don't have any questions, than saying that Rav Yehuda said it in the name of Rav, and then I'm bombarded with this question, that I have a contradiction in Rav. And that's what we're saying. Okay? So it comes out that according to Shitat Abaye, right, that Rav Yosef was agreeing with him, the machloka between Rav Yehuda and Rav, right, that's what's actually coming out. There's a machloka between Rav Yehuda and Rav. Rav Yehuda was going according to Shmuel, but again, there's no contradiction, right, between Rav and what he just said here. But Rav is his shita, and Rav Yehuda holds a different shita, like Shmuel. Okay? Until here, clear? Yeah? So, Hashta damar le Rav Sheshat le Rav Shmuel bar Abba. Now that Rav Sheshat told Rav Shmuel bar Abba, ve'amni, or some people said it wasn't Rav Shmuel bar Abba, but rather Rav Yosef bar Abba. Asper alecha, I'm going to come and explain to you the words of Rav to understand what exactly was going on. Because remember, Rav just said this halacha, that it was a breach, and he said that the entire mavu, you're not allowed to carry in it. So what's going on? So he says, kan she'ervu, kan she'lo ervu. It all depends whether they made an eruv or they didn't make an eruv. Okay? What does that mean? When Rav said the mavui, you're not allowed to carry the mavui at all, he's not talking about the entire mavui. Sometimes it's asur and sometimes it's permitted. If they made eruvei chatzerot, remember, eruvei chatzerot, I'll just apply it nowadays so you understand. An apartment building, right, is usually technically, it's like a reshut ha-yachid, but not entirety. The public domain is Collins. You have apartment buildings. Now, my apartment is my private domain, but now the hallways in the apartment are not my private domain. They're public property, but it's not really public. I'm saying nobody could just come from the street and start using it. It does belong in a certain sense to the people of the condominium or the apartment building, but it's not entirely ours. So what do? You make eruvei chatzerot. Right now, remember, the apartment buildings nowadays are like the chatzerot in the olden days. Remember, in the olden days, you had a mavui, which is like a side street. It opened up to a courtyard. That courtyard was shared common grounds. Okay, and then in the courtyard itself, you had your own house. But the courtyard itself was shared between people. So it's the same thing like the apartment buildings. That's why I wanted to apply. So what are you supposed to do? Let's say the roof broke in Surfside, chas v'shalom. You're not allowed to carry outside. Am I allowed to carry in the apartment building itself or not? In my house, it's my private domain. I'm for sure allowed to carry. But am I allowed to carry from my neighbor to another neighbor? Or am I allowed to carry from one place to another in the same building? Can I go downstairs, upstairs, carry this, that? So if we do eruvei chatzerot, you're permitted. Eruvei chatzerot means that we come and we do like an eruv, right? With matzah or bread and an egg. You know, we do mamash an eruv between us. We all do it between all the Jews together. And we rent out from the person in charge, whether it's the manager or whoever it is, we rent out from them the possibility that we're allowed to use all the common grounds. So now we're allowed to use it. Okay, now by doing that, that allows that we're all considered partners in it. And since we're all considered partners, now we're allowed to carry within the entire building. And there's no problem. That's called eruvei chatzerot. So here it says over here, according to Shitat Rav, when we say here that this is considered, if you did eruvei chatzerot, so then you're allowed to be metaltel in the entire mavui. Because that means that it's not considered mefulash, it's not considered breached to the Reshut Rabim. Right? That means even though there is a breach, it's not considered breach because all of that is common grounds for ourselves. And therefore, it's considered like a closed area. However, though, if you did not do an eruv, then it is considered breach, and then you're not allowed to use the entire area. So it comes out, the Rav nami lo kashya. That means now, according to this, there's no question on Abaye from that which he said it from Rav on Rav Yehuda now. Why? Because the exact same thing that we just mentioned. Kan shirvu b'nei chatzer b'nei mavui. Kan shelu. It all depends whether there was an eruv between the chatzer and the mavui and not, which means like this. There is something which is called eruvei chatzerot. Eruvei chatzerot is within the same chatzer. So within the same apartment building, I'm allowed to do it. What happens now if I wanted to do an eruv between myself, which we live in one part, to the mavui. That's not called eruvei chatzerot anymore, because chatzerot is within the same courtyard. Now it's called shitufei mevuot. Shitufei mevuot means that all the people of the same mavui, we connect to make all one entity. So, for example, I'll give you the example. 93rd Street, right? If everyone lives in Surfside, or the majority of people know 93rd Street, where the community center is. That's where I live. Okay, 93rd Street. So we're going to call the 93rd Street is considered a mavui. Okay, it's considered the side street. The main streets, which is a sratia that we mentioned, was Collins, Harding, and then we have 93rd Street as a mavui. There's a chatzer. The mavui is open up to the chatzerot. Abbott, which is the closed street, going 93rd towards Publix, is the closed street. That's called the chatzer. The chatzer is the street itself, and it's open up to all the houses. All the houses are the houses which are open. It's much more because usually once upon a time, there weren't going to be like 20 houses there. You understand, in a chatzer. Usually it would be much smaller, but I just gave you the example just so that you understand. So you have the chatzer is Abbott area on both sides. One chatzer here, one chatzer there. Abbott from 93rd to 94th and 93rd to 92nd. Okay, or you could do Byron, you could do Kerala, you could do whichever street you want. That's the concept. The mavui is 93rd Street. So what happens is, there's one concept which is called eruvei chatzerot. So eruvei chatzerot means that, for example, on 93rd over there, you would have Laurent Becker, and you would have, Jonathan Edrai, and all the people that live on that street. All the Jews would come together. They would join together, do eruvei chatzerot, and now they're allowed to carry on that entire street. Okay, and now there's no problem. Now, there's another concept called shitufei mevuot. Shitufei mevuot means I'm 93rd Street, that's a mavui. So the truth is, right, nobody would actually live in the mavui. The mavui was just a street. People would live in the chatzerot, in the courtyards, which are adjacent to it. So now, what they would do is, let's say, for example, you would have Laurent Becker living on one side, okay? And then you would have Richard Moore living on the other side. They would join together in an eruv. But now again, remember, they already did an eruv for their own chatzer, their own street. Now they're doing it for the mavui. Okay, so therefore, if they join together the chatzer with the mavui, right? So then it's going to become permitted. Okay, but if they didn't, then it's prohibited. Because once they join together the chatzer with the mavui, it all becomes one. So therefore, even though there's a breach on the top, it's not considered a breach. And therefore, you're allowed to carry inside of it and there's no problem. However, though, if they didn't do it, so then it's considered mifulash. It's considered that it's goes straight through from one Reshut Rabim to another Reshut Rabim, and then you're going to have the problem. And with this, we finish, right, today's Daf.